Kaylin, the sweetest lark, she stands alone. In placid calm, her thoughts unknown. In private places, her psyche dwells, shared secrets kept, she never tells. Her presence reigns, fair and delightful, lovelier than all the rest, dearest friend to oh so many. My Kaylin preens above the best. Heralded, cherished confidant, her kindness soars beyond the star that she is born and cradled under, casts petals of her charm afar. Our deepest wish, God's soundest gift, in her you'll know that you are loved, beyond condition, fretful glare, or ways she isn't worthy of. We saw we had been blessed anew, with fondest eyes she pierced the world, arresting beauty, regal too, resplendent, glorious baby girl. Imagine not a life without her radiant scent, her spilling smile, her gentler game of beckoning life, anointed angel, past care, past guile. This daughter, most beloved child, angelic, sweet, enchanting child, her will so fixed and resolute, like shades of dazzling Faberges. I think I'm mispronouncing that word. I don't know it. Polished, grand, evocative, a labyrinth swirls of cloisonne. I'm mispronouncing that word too. I don't know what it means. A wisp of ladylike allure, a maiden crisp, her mind intense, fair mademoiselle of steel and wisdom, of captivating intelligence. Her manner tacit and so certain, swift grace and poise greets one and all. Her friendship too perpetually sought, benevolence her obliging call. A grand and winsome sentiment of tender charity and goodwill. Amiable nymph of pleasing rapture, her overtures of kindness stills. Those whose sojourns laced with karma, an ally fierce, she stands tranquil. Delicate femme of winning virtue, refined, curt, dainty elegance. Of classic lines her beauty peaks, round out by witty eloquence. Her state is oft mostly becoming, fitting smooth for her countenance. An ever dulcet spirit waiting, endearing good, her quintessence. Her life kissed by a moonlit path shall blend with warm and turquoise seas, enticing goddesses to wander near her soul, replete in peace. Hey guys, that is a poem written by my mother, Michelle, who is deceased, and she passed away in 2007. And so in this video, I'm going to explain to you guys what happened. I have been missing from YouTube again because my son came down with pneumonia for the second time in a year. So I'm going to do a video about that as well, but he is better finally, but it took about a month of getting the cold and getting pneumonia and then it going away, then the pneumonia coming back. And so I will do a separate video about that. But my mother passed away on around April 14th in 2007, and I wanted to do this video but got caught up with my son being sick. So that was a poem that my mother wrote about me. She was a writer, a poet, just like I am also a writer and poet. And so in this video, I'm going to explain to you what happened and how it also ties into who I am today and the challenges that I face today as an African American mother living abroad in Namibia. In 2007, I was 23 years old and I was living in just outside of Washington, D.C. I was working in broadcast news. My mother was 52 and she was living between New York and Mississippi. My brother went to an African American boarding school down there, and that's how in Mississippi. And so that's how she kind of got to know Mississippi. And she put him in a school down there because she was she found it difficult. She found it difficult to find a proper high school. It was difficult for her to find a proper high school to educate her Black son. And you all know what I'm talking about. It's hard to get Black children educated well in America, in the public school system. It's, in the public school system, you got those issues. In the private school system, you've got, the racism and so yeah, it was just difficult for her. So she enrolled him she found this African American boarding school and she enrolled him there. And she was from Brooklyn, New York. She was a New York native, born and raised in Brooklyn, of West Indian descent. All four of her grandparents were Bayesian, were Barbadians. And she, although she was born in Brooklyn, she was tired of Brooklyn. She was tired of New York. So like I was raised in Westchester County, New York, which is like a suburb just outside of New York City. And my mom was sick of New York. She was just sick of a lot of stuff. I'll have to talk more about in detail in a book or something like that. I could go on. This is a whole thing. But she was sick of New York. So she decided when she found she got to know Mississippi, she really liked the vibe and the energy and the blackness, the different blackness that Mississippi had to offer. And she decided to move down there. And my parents were also divorced. That's another thing. So my dad was, he still lives in Manhattan. So my mother decided that she wanted to move to Mississippi, and she just started having this social life, and she would go there more and more often, and she ended up like buying a condo renting a condo down there. And I didn't like it because I was young and selfish. And I didn't like the new home, or my new home per se. You know, I like to go home to New York. I didn't want to go home to Mississippi, like on my vacations and stuff like that. It was just totally different. Now that I'm 34 years old, I totally understand her feelings of wanting to move out of the Northeast America and things like that. And so, yeah. So, but at the time I wasn't supportive. I was kind of a brat about it. And I feel bad about that actually. But anyway, so she decided to move to Mississippi, and there was a trip where she was transporting her stuff. Now she decided to transport like some things of hers from New York to Mississippi, and that she would drive them all the way there on her own. And I remember one day I was walking home from work, and I was talking to her on the phone, and she was driving to Mississippi, and I was like, why would you do that? I remember saying that. Why would you do that? Like, that's too much. Because my mother, like, even when she would take a train from New York to Baltimore, she would be tired, and she would get tired, and she would need like a day or two to like recuperate from traveling, like once she got older. So I knew that driving or flying somewhere, even when she would fly from New York to Mississippi, she would get tired. And so I knew that a drive to Mississippi was way too much. But she was so excited about, you know, wanting to move there, understandably, that she just took things into her own hands and decided to go down there. So like, I'm going to leave some things out of this story for respect of like some people. I can't tell everything, but I'm telling you the most important parts, and it doesn't really change the outcome or anything like that. So she was going to Mississippi, and she was driving. I said, why would you do that? And she's like, no, I'll be fine, or whatever. And I was like, okay. Like, so I remember we got off the phone, and I had seen her, I don't know, some months, maybe the last time I had seen her might have been some months before that. I was going to Barbados on my own, I think. Yeah, I was going to Barbados to visit my grandmother who was there. And she took me to the airport. And I remember just after we said goodbye, for some reason, this thought flashed in my mind. And I thought to myself, and I said, what if this was I just thought, what if this thought came, like, what if this was the last time that I saw her? I don't know where that thought came from. I had never thought anything like that before, but it flashed into my head, literally, like, and then it was fleeting though. It was like in and out, and I never thought about it again. But like, I remember thinking that for some odd reason. So anyway, fast forward to me being in Maryland and her driving to Mississippi. I talked to her, and so she got down there. I think I talked to her a few more times after she arrived. I spoke to her again, and then some days went by and I hadn't spoken to her, but that wasn't totally uncommon, so I didn't really like freak out. I remember calling, no one answered. I still didn't freak out, because it just happened sometimes that we didn't talk or whatever. Like, so then there was a day when my grandmother called, my mom's mom. She called me on the phone, and she was like, this is the one in Barbados, my mother's mother. So she called me from Barbados, and she's like, oh, have you spoken to your mother lately? And I'm like, no. And she was like, okay. And I'm like, okay, all right. I was like, yeah, I think she's just busy, whatever. And she was like, okay, all right, bye. So then I remember there was a night. So then a few days later, like there was a night I was hanging out with this guy, and he was at my apartment, and someone buzzed my apartment, right? So I was like, okay, I'll be back. Let me go downstairs. So I went downstairs, and my dad and his cousins who live in the Washington, D.C., Maryland area, they're in the lobby. And so I go to, so I'm like, what are you guys doing here? Like, it was just so random. Like, again, my dad lives in New York, like, and my cousins had never come to my like apartment before. So I'm like, what are you guys doing here? And then my dad just goes, Kaylin, your mother's in heaven now. And I just like dropped to the floor. I've never dropped to the floor or been that emotional in my entire life, but it was so shocking that was my reaction. So I dropped to the floor, and I was just like crying. Like, it was like I was another person. I don't have reactions like that. Even, like this is the one time in my life that I've ever had a reaction like that. And so it turns out that when my grandmother in Barbados called me and was asking me when was the last time that I had spoken to my mother, it turns out that she and I guess the family was trying to gauge the best way to break the news to me. So I think she was trying to figure out like where my head was, what I was doing, like things like that. It was just really weird. I mean, I don't think anybody knew what the hell to do. I mean, it was a very odd, bizarre situation, but they knew what had happened. They knew that she had passed away, but they were trying to figure out the best way to tell me. And this is so, yeah. And that's why my dad ended up just coming all the way to Maryland to tell me face to face with his cousins. After that, it was just a lot. I ended up having like to be driven to New York. The guy that was at my house was really decent. He actually drove me to New York from Maryland. It's like a 4-hour drive. Him and this friend of mine they came with me. We went to New York, and then from New York we met with my uncle who lives in New York, my mom's brother, and then we went to and then we ended up flying to Mississippi. Me and my family went flying to Mississippi because that is where my mother had passed away. So what happened to my mom, basically she had something called deep vein thrombosis, which is a blood clot formed in her legs and went to her lungs, and she was at her house, her condo that she had purchased down there. And she was alone, and it seems like she had gone downstairs, and at the bottom of the steps was where she was found. And that's where the blood clot killed her. And how was my mother found? Well, like I said, she was moving to Mississippi. She had been socializing with people down there. She had friends down there. And, again, I'm skipping over some information, but her friends came to her house after not being able to reach her and were trying to reach her, and like the doors of the house were locked, but they looked through the back door and managed to be able to see the staircase, and they could see her at the bottom of the staircase. And so that is how she was unfortunately found. And they had to call the police to get into the house. And that was that. And it always, that's part of the thing that is like difficult, because like you wonder, like I used to wonder, like, did she go through pain and how long was she? But like from what I read and from what someone told me, like with deep vein thrombosis, when a blood clot forms, it can be just about an instant killer. It can be an instant killer, so that makes me feel a bit better. I mean, if you're gonna die, that's a great way, in my opinion, to die, like quick and easy, and not some drawn out, agonizing death. So I like to think that it was fast. And she wasn't found until a few days afterwards. And I'm getting emotional as I don't want to cry on camera. She wasn't found until a few days afterwards. So, what that does to a person physically when they're not preserved immediately when they pass away is pretty disturbing. They get bloated and they just don't quite recognize the same. But anyway, when we buried her, she had there was this pink lipstick that her signature was like bright pink lipstick and braids. She always had these like cornrows and like individual braids in the back. That was her signature look for years. And so even though she looked different, I got the pink lipstick and she had her braids still in. So it was her, she had on her I gave them the pink nail polish that she used to always wear that matched her lipstick perfectly. And so it was still her. And so my mother is buried in Mississippi. Her funeral was, I feel like it was exactly the way she wanted it to be. Again, my mother was a New Yorker, but her funeral, it was just such a like deep, deep South, Southern Black experience. Like, just the church was like this quaint Black Mississippian church. The people, just genuine, warm-hearted, good Black Southern Mississippians. And that is what attracted her to Mississippi. And only then did I realize why she had fallen in love with the state and with the culture and with the Blackness down there. And she was making so many friends. Like, then I understood, like, well, now I see why, I understand why she liked it down here so much. It's good people, it's good community. But the funeral is, it was so, it just had that deep South, rich Black cultural vibe to it. And I feel like it just, they were singing Negro spirituals. Some of her friends, I think sang. It was just so culturally Black and rich, in terms of the energy of her funeral. That was perfect for her. And she's buried down there. And that's so much more of a heartwarming place to me, although I know the history of Mississippi and the lynchings, and but there's also, despite the negative stuff that has happened with Black people, there's also the positive, the rich Black culture that has come out of the deep South, that is still around. And so I'm happy that she is in the soil, of that and of that energy, and I think that's where she was supposed to be buried as well. So it was it made sense to me in hindsight when I just look at all these things. I mean, that's what she deserved, like that's the way, that's such a uniquely spiritual, Black spiritual way, and place for her to rest, and for her to be buried. And so, yeah. Now we were, this probably happened because she drove all the way from New York to Mississippi and didn't take enough breaks, and blood clot can form in your leg. And I have paranoias about that happening to me, actually. Like, I'm so paranoid about, like, not stretching enough, sitting down for long periods of time and stuff like that. Because she was only 52 when this happened. I also think that my mother kind of foreshadowed her death, because so she passed away in April of 2007. In December of 2007, she bought her mother, my grandmother, a couple of books, but one book in particular, and she sent it to my grandmother as a Christmas gift. And the book was like, I forgot the title. The title was like something like, "What If I Never," or something like that. Or what if I never, or yeah. And so the whole book, it's a short book, but the whole book was like just these sentences like, "What if today was the last time that I knew I would see your smile? What if we didn't get to hug again?" It was like, what if, like all these things. And the whole purpose of the book was to, just encourage you to value your time with your loved ones. It wasn't like a depressing book. It was just more so like, so that's what she bought this book for my grandmother, for her mother, and gave it to her as a gift. So literally a few months later, she passed away. So it's just, again, like between that and that fleeting thought that I had in my head about what if this is the last time I saw her, and that was literally the last time I saw her. It was just like the universe and the stars and fate was just shifting itself into what eventually happened. The other foreshadowing that she had of her death that I think was she made me this amazing pink and green photo album, like out of this world. And I remember she was just so hell-bent on getting it complete. And she gave it to me a few months before she passed away. And I even remember talking to her on the phone, and she was like, just like, oh my God, like just complaining about how she had kind of gotten in over her head. Like she was at Target, like, making copies, and it was just a huge project, and she felt like she had taken on too much, but she had to get it completed for me. And this photo album is just so special because it was like she put everything into it. There are pictures of course, me and my brother growing up, but she put in pictures of like my great grandfather who I'd never met, like great great aunts from Barbados who I'd never met, like pictures of my grandmother as a dancer in Haiti, like pictures of my other grandmother. It was just such an all encompassing photo album. And I feel like somehow, some way, she was driven to give me this, like, as something to hold on to once she was gone, as a memory of just, or just as a means of me knowing who I am. And I'm telling this, I guess, because people always, like I said, people ask me, I meet people all the time and they ask me, how does your family feel about you being all the way in Africa? And it's always awkward because I have to tell them, like, oh, my dad feels this way, but my mom is deceased, like what else are you supposed to say? Like, because mothers are big parts of people's lives. So it's like, you can't really explain how you're doing without explaining how you're doing abroad, without explaining your mother's feelings. But then when your mother's not here, like, so people, it's awkward, and so that's how she passed away. And it's difficult. This is also why, like I said, I just go missing on YouTube, and my blog, my website is not, as great as it could be, just because as a young woman and now as a mother, it's hard to go through life without your mother, without having that person to ask advice to, chat on the phone with, and things like that, especially when you're abroad. That's like that would be a big support system, and she's not around, especially as a mother. That's where it has really hit home, because I'm always seeing stuff online and people on Facebook talking about Happy Mother's Day, and their mother is babysitting their child, or my mom told me this is what you do with your kid, and this is how you potty train your child, and I don't have her to talk to about so many mother related things. So it's been difficult for me, also in Namibia, as a parent, especially just because the reality of her not being here has, like, the wound has kind of reopened because I'm a mother, and I don't have that many mother figures around for advice. And my grandmother, my dad's mother, she was also, like, I would say the second closest thing that I had to a mother. Unfortunately, 3 years after my mom passed away, she developed pancreatic cancer. I had to go take care of her in Baltimore, and then she passed away. So I lost, like, the two mother figures that I had in, like, within 3 years of each other, and I'd never experienced death or anything like that before, but that period from 2007 to 2010 was just, like, really bizarre, like, and just a lot of death. And those are the two people that, for me, I would have, I just talked to them so much, and they were like, my mother was, I can't even describe how she was. She was such a unique person and such a special individual. She was very clear just about, like, Black related things. She was brilliant. She was a phenomenal writer. I'll have to, like, find a poem of hers that she wrote. When I tell you she's an amazing writer, like, amazing. Like, she had, like, a thesaurus that she would, like, keep with her. Like, that's how much she was, like, in terms of, like, being a writer. Like, she loved words. And that's also where I've realized I get, like, the writing gene from. It's crazy how, like, genetics are. And and she was just such a dynamic person. Like, again, like, she stood out wherever she went. Like, people always just, like, know, like, oh my God, your mom, like Kaylin's mom, like, she was just like this presence. I'll put in a picture of her. And my grandmother, my dad's mom, she was the warmest grandmother you could ever have. She was sassy. She was funny. She didn't have time, for people in their annoying, like, ways, which is kind of how I am a lot of the times. Actually, I realized, like, she was one of the few, like, her and my mom were, like, one of the few, they were, like, one of the few people, two of the few people that I could actually just speak so openly about, just, like, things that get on your nerves, like, everyday life things, like, dealing with people, because they were just so, I don't know, frank about certain things. So, and my grandmother, like, was an amazing cook. Like, she was from the South, from, like, North Carolina, and, like, that whole soul food thing, like, that was her. Like, I just had an amazing, I was blessed to have an amazing grandmother, an amazing mother. My other grandmother, my mom's mom, she has dementia now. That's a whole nother story. But she is also a phenomenal person and woman. I think I get the travel bug from her because she left Barbados and retired, not left Brooklyn and retired and moved to Barbados where her parents are from. And she was. My grandmother also lived in Haiti for a year in, I think, the late 1940s or very early 1950s as a professional dancer. She was one of the dance partners of Jean-Leon Destiné, who is a man that is considered a Haitian-born American who is considered to be the father of Haitian traditional dance. And so these pictures are of my grandmother during her year in Haiti as a dancer. So that's also where I get the travel bug from in her. She also got her master's degree in, I think, public health from Columbia University when she was like a single mother with 3 kids back when that was a very challenging thing to do. So, yeah. She was like the tech grandma. Like she was always on the computer. She's always on the computer, on the internet, email, like reading the New York Times. Like that was her. Like, so I had like these 2 different like extremes of grandmothers. Like one was the very homely one, like in the kitchen all the time, cooking soul food and meals. And the other one was like this New York, Brooklyn, like RN, head of like nursing at like different like hospitals in Brooklyn, and retired and moved abroad to the Caribbean where her parents were born. And it was like she was like the tech grandma and was emailing and Skyping people and online banking, like even in her older age. So I have like really amazing women that I like come from. But it's been hard because, like I said, when I complain about challenges of being in Namibia and people respond by saying I'm not making the best out of my situation, or when I say things like I miss home and people say things like, oh, I could never miss home. What are you talking about? How could you miss America? It's like, you don't even know the half of it. Like for one, I'm married to a Namibian. I'm not here like with an American spouse. Like some people that criticize me, like they're here with like other Americans, or they're working with other Americans, or they're living in the capital city, and like they're not married to a Namibian and having to integrate like at such a deep level of like the local society, or people that just, they don't have any understanding of like where my feelings of like homesickness come from, where my feelings of homesickness, or even sometimes when I feel depressed and lonely and, and when I get frustrated with life in Namibia, people don't, and I talk about my town is boring or this and that. People don't really understand like the layers. And I understand that because I don't share these things. They don't understand the layers, of that I'm really coming from. Like it's not, I don't make surface level comments. I do analyze things, but when I'm homesick, there are reasons that I'm homesick. It's because I miss, many things about just life growing up that were snatched away from me by death, and things that I'm dealing with and I'm still dealing with as a young woman, and just trying to, navigate that. Like my mother's been deceased for 2007, so that's like almost 11 years. 11 years. And 11 years. And so you forget about it, but then it comes back in different life events, like living abroad or having a child, or your child getting pneumonia. They reopen the wounds again. And I think that my mom, although she's not physically here, she's around. Like she always wanted to go to South Africa. I remember she used to talk about how I heard the shopping in South Africa is amazing. I got to go there. I wasn't even into visiting Africa at that time. I was young and immature. And now in hindsight, I'm like, damn, like she would have loved it, and because when she passed away, I also, had a lot more freedom to make my own decisions. And so that's how I also ended up deciding to like visit Barbados, and I ended up moving there for like a year and a half. If she was around, I don't think, like when she was around, like I was more so on the straight and narrow corporate ladder path, and, just trying to, I think, keep my mother satisfied, because she had shown, raised me to show me you get internships and do this and to navigate my way to success. But when she passed away, I had a bit more freedom. So I ended up like moving abroad to Barbados and then coming to Namibia. So my life path like changed dramatically. And, but I do think that she's around, like with my son, Lance, parenthood is not easy, but I feel like Lance has been, in hindsight, he has been like an easy first child. He like putting him to bed was easy. Breastfeeding was easy. Teaching him how to get potty trained has been so easy. I know I mentioned that in the other video. But just potty training him, like, we've gotten it together, and he's just so like on it. Like, he's so independent. I was trying to teach him, when I started potty training him, I was trying to teach him to sit down. Lance was like, no, I want to stand up and use the potty like my dad. And so from the first day, he stood up and peed like a man facing the potty. Like, things like that. Like, I can't even go into so many things because the video would be too long. But Lance is like such an easy first child to have. And I know the second child may not be the same, but I feel like often like my mother like almost handmade him to perfection to make it easier for me to be a mother without her physically around. And so when the times get difficult, I really, and this is why I'm so big on, like, if you follow my Instagram, well, no, if you're my friend and you follow my personal Instagram, not my African American in Africa Instagram, I post a lot of things about like ancestors, and even my first blog, the name of it was Ancestrally on Tumblr. And because I've always just had this, especially since she passed away, like I just feel very connected to my ancestors, to her. My mother and I used to watch like psychic TV shows together and things like that. Mediums, those TV shows, we used to watch things like that. So I'm just very connected. I feel very connected to her, my grandmother, and my African ancestors, and my Barbadian ancestors, my Southern American ancestors, my slave ancestors, everybody. I feel very connected to them. And things have happened over the years that I know my mother has had a hand in as well. So that's why I'm also big on like encouraging people to visit the African continent and feel like connecting with their roots is an important thing, because I think, it's so much bigger than like, life is so much bigger than like face value and surface. And I feel like there are a lot of forces and a lot of energy that is constantly with us from people like your African ancestors that guide you and help you throughout life. And so that's how my mom passed away. Like I said, it was on or about April 14th, 2007. And we don't know the exact day that she passed away, and I don't know how I've gotten through it. People always say things like, oh my God, I don't know what I could do without my mother. It's like you would get through life and you would keep it moving because you wouldn't have a choice. Now, of course, everybody deals with it differently. Like Kanye West, I think it's pretty obvious that he kind of went downhill, after his mom passed away, and she died in horrific like circumstances. So I'm not going to judge the way he's handling it. I mean, although maybe he's not, I don't know. Like he does seems like things kind of went downhill after that, which is very sad actually. But I've been able to, live my life, and sometimes I even forget about it, but that she passed away. But then now it really, as a mother, more often than not, just so many things happen like that make me wish that I could just pick up the phone and ask her for advice. I can't ask her how to potty train Lance. That's why I went on YouTube. When he got pneumonia, like I didn't know what to do. Like I remember when I was young, my mother used to put Vicks on my chest and alcohol and wrap us up to clear up our coughs. But I couldn't remember the exact things that she did. And I know my dad didn't know because he's great, but she was the one that was doing that, not him. So like I just wanted to ask her, and I couldn't remember exactly like what she used to do. I just know that she used to do Vicks wraps, and it was just things like that. Just little things trigger your emotions, and it's difficult. So anyway, I'm just sharing that story, I guess, to also give inspiration and strength to other people, especially mothers, especially Black women, Black mothers who have lost their mothers and are trying to navigate their way through motherhood, because that it plays with your mind. It really does. And that's why I don't put too much pressure on myself with many things. And like I said, I'm learning that balance is key. As this doctor told me the other day, in life, balance is key. So I am delicate on myself and trying to get my own health together and exercise more and things like that, because I'm paranoid that I'm going to pass away the way my mom did. So anyway, that's my story. A little insight into my personal background and how I ended up here in Namibia. How something horrible can happen, and it can snatch you up from everything you thought you were supposed to be doing and shift you into a completely opposite direction. And that's why I also always try to find the hidden message in someone passing away, in negative situations, whether it's losing a job, whether it's something, just getting sick. It's just, or someone not being who I thought they were, or like, I always try to find like, what is the hidden message in this, and what is the positivity that's coming out of this, and why am I being pulled away from that and shifted to something else? And I just think with my mother, my grandmother, they were, my mother was also stressed out. That's a whole other thing. And as was my grandmother in a way. So I think that, it's better for my mother to be, and my grandmother, just to be in that other realm of bliss, as opposed to in this chaotic, aggressive, insane world that we live in, where she can help us the way that she wants to help us and guide us the way she wants to guide us, and not be so stressed out by life and New York and relocating, and it was just and getting us educated and being stressed out about, is Kaylin doing well, and just life, and so that's the way I think it was supposed to be, and that's how I look at it, and that's how I get through being a motherless daughter, as they call it. But I don't consider myself motherless, but just getting through life without her here in Namibia, and that's all you can do. Just many days I'm walking and there's something irritating that happens, and I just think of my mom and just ask her to just shine her light and her energy onto me to get me through whatever challenging experience that I'm having abroad. All right, guys, so I have rambled long enough. I have to get Lance soon from school, so I will talk to you soon. If you've lost someone, or I don't know, or you feel especially connected to your ancestors, or you've had experiences where you just know that someone or something is guiding you and strengthening you. If you don't know how you've gotten through things and you've made it through somehow, some way, if you're a mother and maybe you didn't lose your mother, but maybe your mother was not a part of your life, or you just don't have that much of a social life, and you're on your own, and you read these blogs, and everybody else seems like they have all the support in the world and you don't. Share your comments below, because you're not alone, and that's also that's been my experience, and that's why I shared this, just to be empowering to somebody, and also remind myself of my own power and what I've gotten through and what I can continue to deal with. Okay, guys, thanks so much for supporting my channel. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.